Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us. My name is Andrew Tobin. I'm a partner specialising in insurance and reinsurance at Mills & Reeve's London office, and today I'll be speaking for 15 minutes on the subject of Lloyds of London. This is a one-way presentation and we can't see or hear you. There are no slides today, but the recording will be available on our website, and indeed I think a copy or a link will be sent to you afterwards. If you have questions as we go along, please type them into the question and answer box, and I will try to deal with some of them at the end. Today's talk is pitched mainly at those of you who are not at all familiar with Lloyds, but perhaps also at those of you who may have worked in the market for a few years at least, but remain totally mystified by it. There are obviously limits to what I can cover in 15 minutes, but if any of you would like to discuss the subject further directly with me after the presentation, then please do get in touch. Today, collectively, Lloyd's insurers collect more than £35 billion of premium per year. That's 45 billion US dollars. And they usually pay out more than half of that back out in claims. These days, nearly every type of insurance and reinsurance business you can think of is conducted at Lloyd's, but it is especially known as being the place to come if you wish to place unusual, large or complex risks from anywhere in the world. But it's a unique animal, commonly misunderstood, and that is not surprising, perhaps, given its unusual history, structures, practices and jargon, which do not exist anywhere else. The first and most commonly misunderstood point about Lloyd's is that it is an insurance company. In fact, Lloyd's is definitely not an insurance company. Rather, Lloyd's is a unique insurance market, which nowadays is regulated by statute, specifically by 4 Lloyd's Acts dating from 1871 to 1982. But what do I mean by an insurance market? Well, to put it very simply, it's a place where members of the market, the insurers, who are also known as underwriters at Lloyd's, can sell insurance. And Lloyd's brokers, who represent clients wishing to buy insurance, can come to meet those underwriters to present and negotiate policies with them. A simple analogy would be with a fruit and vegetable market. For example, you might visit New Covent Garden Market, where you might see 50 or 100 businesses selling fruit, all under one roof. They will have fruit at different qualities and prices, and you can choose to buy from whoever you want. But when you buy your fruit, you buy it from the particular seller in the market, and not from the New Covent Garden Market Authority itself. Your contract is with the individual traders and not with the market's overall governing body. And so it is at Lloyd's. When insurance is bought at Lloyd's, it is bought from one or more of the insurers who are members of the Lloyd's marketplace, and not from the Society of Lloyd's itself, which is the market's overall governing body and which is not itself an insurance company, although it does have important regulatory powers governing the insurers within the Lloyd's market. I may say more about that later. But how on earth did this strange marketplace come to exist in the way it does? Well, like many British institutions, no one in particular invented it. Rather, it's the result of gradual evolution. And to understand it today, we need to go back to the late 17th century, when the City of London itself was the world's busiest port, bustling with ship owners, merchants, sailors and entrepreneurs. At that time, people didn't have offices as such, but it was fashionable for businessmen to meet in coffee houses to conduct their trade. And there were thousands of them around the City of London. Edward Lloyd had a coffee shop situated firstly on Great Tower Street and then on Lombard Street that became popular with wealthy ship owners. Nowadays, there's a Sainsbury's local on the Lombard Street site. Ship owning at that time was very risky. Fortunes could be made, but also lost if a vessel was lost due to weather, navigation errors, to pirates, foreign enemies, and so on. At some point, over the pipe, smoke and coffee at Lloyd's coffee shop, it seems that these ship owners started to hedge their respective risks by agreeing to insure the risk of the loss of vessels with each other and with other wealthy businessmen that used to attend the coffee shop and who would be willing to take some risk in exchange for premium. To keep these wealthy gentlemen returning to his shop, Mr. Lloyd and the subsequent owners of his coffee shop made sure that Lloyd's Coffee House became the leading place to go in the city for shipping news and for people wishing to participate in this new business of insurance. Indeed, Mr. Lloyd would rent out tables from which those gentlemen could do insurance business, like an early WeWork perhaps. Those tables were then known as boxes, and to this day, the insurers' desks in the modern Lloyd's building are still known as boxes. As this early insurance business grew, certain people made it their business to hang around the docks and pubs of London to meet ship owners wishing to buy insurance. These people were the early Lloyd's brokers. Having found a potential customer, the broker would draw up a short document known as a slip, briefly describing the vessel and the voyage, and then take it to Lloyd's coffee shop, where he could be fairly confident of finding a number of wealthy gentlemen likely to be interested in insuring ships in exchange for premium. And I say gentlemen with a degree of confidence because, amazingly perhaps, Lloyd's did not admit women until 1972. Anyway, the brokers would show the slip to these gentlemen in the coffee shop, get non-binding indications of the premium that they required and details of any additional terms they wish to impose. They would take that quote back to their ship owner client. If the terms were acceptable, the broker would be instructed to go back to Lloyd's to get the slip signed by those gentlemen, thus concluding a binding contract of insurance, which came to be known as a policy. Typically, risks would be insured not just by one, but by several of these businessmen who would each write their name on the slip or sign their name on the slip and write what proportion of the risk they were prepared to assume. Because they would sign their names in a list under each other, they came to be known as underwriters or names with a capital N. And so from its early days, Lloyd's was always a subscription market. That is to say, it was a place where underwriters would underwrite, where several underwriters would underwrite or subscribe to insure a single risk. As to payment for the broker, a practice developed whereby the underwriter would allow the broker to deduct a percentage fee or brokerage for his trouble. But notwithstanding the fact of payment by the underwriter, the English courts have always made clear that the broker is the agent of the insured and not the underwriter in a traditional insurance placement. And if you're interested in learning more about the legal duties that arise upon the placement of a risk and their history, I would encourage you to look at our first two Cover Talk webinars, which discussed the fair presentation of risk and its predecessor, the duty of good faith. Lloyd's has moved premises 7 times since 1688, and at some point in time, when it came to resemble more of a trading floor rather than a coffee shop, the physical space where the underwriters were to be found came to be called the room, a capital T and a capital R, and it's still called that today. It was always understood from the beginning that names at Lloyd's had unlimited personal liability for claims. Indeed, it was often said that they were liable down to their last cufflink. That remained the case until 1993, when the market began to allow participation by certain corporate entities having limited liability, although there are still a handful of individual Lloyd's names participating in the market today. Over time, and as Britain's naval dominance grew, more and more wealthy people wished to have a piece of the action, and also the increase in shipping tonnage led to the need for a greater number of names amongst whom to spread the risk. It was not practicable for all of them to hang around Lloyd's coffee house or for the brokers to try and meet them all. And in any case, many of them lived outside London and or would have little or no understanding of the business of marine insurance. Essentially, they were amateur investors. A solution evolved by which groups of names came together to form syndicates. All the members of the syndicate would grant authority to a professional underwriter at Lloyd's, known as a managing agent, who would underwrite risks on behalf of all of the members of the syndicate, hopefully profitably. In that way, the broker need only visit the managing agent, who could subscribe to the risk on behalf of all of the members of the relevant syndicate. And to keep the managing agent honest, he too would be required to have some skin in the game. He would also be a member of the syndicate, sharing in the profits and losses of the business that he himself was underwriting. And although Lloyd's business has grown enormously and technology has facilitated aspects of it, the fundaments of placing business at Lloyd's remain the same today. The Lloyd's broker still receives instructions to insure a risk from an insured, or perhaps he receives instructions from a non-Lloyd's overseas broker. The broker will prepare the slip and show it in person and or electronically to the managing agent of a number of syndicates in the room and seek to persuade them to subscribe to the risk. And of course, these days, not only ships are insured at Lloyd's, but all kinds of marine and non-marine risks worldwide. However, things have not always been rosy at Lloyd's, and in the late 1980s, a series of scandals hit, leading to 5 or more years of successive losses for the names, of which there were more than 30,000 in 1990. Those scandals and losses led to bankruptcy and ruin for many names, and news reports talk of at least 30 suicides. It became plain that the old system of relying on the unlimited liability of individual names was no longer sustainable. And in 1993, the market started allowing corporate entities with limited liability to underwrite at Lloyd's. And today, the overwhelming majority of the market's capital is corporate capital of a limited liability nature. These days, the managing agents are themselves very substantial businesses, employing hundreds of people to underwrite business and pay claims on behalf of the syndicates they represent, as well as containing all the ancillary accounting and regulatory staff. Moreover, many of these managing agents and syndicates are affiliates or subsidiaries of large global insurers who wish to trade in the Lloyd's market in order to be shown those large and complex risks, as well as to make use of the Lloyd's network of insurance licenses around the world. In 1990, there were 401 syndicates. Today, there are only 80, managed by 54 managing agents. That's less than in 1990, but more business is written now than ever before, and probably much more professionally. But how does this whole system hang together? Who organises the market as a whole? From 1688 to 1811, there was simply no overarching organisation at all. The underwriters were simply individuals that would engage in insurance business from Lloyd's coffee house. That business was completely unregulated and uncoordinated. By 1811, however, the coffee house itself was in disrepair. The underwriters trading from it got together to form the Society of Lloyd's to buy the premises so that they could continue to trade. In doing so, they developed the first simple constitution that lasted for 60 years. In 1871, the Society of Lloyd's was given its own independent legal personality by Parliament, in addition to a constitution and statutory rule-making powers. That constitution has been updated by Parliament a number of times, culminating in the Lloyd's Act of 1982. Today, the Society of Lloyd's, also known as the Corporation of Lloyd's, acting by its elected council and committee, carries out a huge range of roles. It rents the Lloyd building, admits members to the market, provides them with boxes from which to trade, makes rules and bylaws, sets minimum standards, controls discipline, gets licenses, and deals with regulators here and abroad on behalf of the whole market, and so on. But as I've tried to make clear at the beginning, it is not itself an insurance company. Importantly, the Society of Lloyds also maintains a central fund to which members contribute. The central fund can be used at the discretion of the Council of Lloyds to meet any valid claim that cannot be met from the resources of any particular member. And today there is about £2.5 billion in the central fund. So it's 11:16, so I think I have just about run out of time, although there's a lot more that can be said. I do hope you found that illuminating, but perhaps let's see what you thought by saying if there are any questions, which I think my colleague Harriet has been gathering for me, I hope.
Thank you very much indeed, Andrew. There are several questions. The first of which I'm going to pose to you is this. Do you think that Lloyds of London will survive the current pandemic, given historically its old-fashioned way of working compared to the manner in which we're now all working from home?
Will it survive the pandemic? Well, the last loss estimate I heard for Lloyds COVID-related losses was about 5 billion, which I think would be bearable for the market. That's equivalent to a couple of nasty hurricanes. Whether that estimate is accurate or not, I don't know. But I think sounds like you're also asking about Lloyd's working practices, given what you said about it being a face-to-face market. It is true that historically the face-to-face market was seen as one of Lloyd's strengths, but it also made it cumbersome. There was a heavy reliance on paper and so on. But in recent years, huge strides have been made to improve their electronic systems. So there are now electronic claims files, and there is an electronic placement system. Personally, I've not used either of these systems, but from the people I speak to, they have had no trouble using them from home. And it may well be that this COVID situation has given the kick to Lloyd's that it needed to make use of these more efficient processes.
Thank you. Somebody else has asked whether or not we've got insight into how these claims are paid when there are so many numbers of underwriters who may have insured one single risk.
That's a good question. So on any single risk, you could have, two or more, one, two, or many more insurers. And strictly speaking, in time gone by, each would have been able to make its own claims determination, which meant the broker would have needed to present the risk to each insurer. And that was a very cumbersome and time-consuming process, particularly when paper was involved. And I even remember at the beginning of my career, the use of large paper claims files, which would be hand-delivered around the market for claims handlers to look at. But Lloyds has done lots of work on streamlining these processes, and there is an electronic claims file system which automates the IT side of it, and there is also the 2010 Lloyds claims scheme, which enables either the leading insurer, which will be the first one to have to sign it or put the stamp down, to determine claims, and its determination will be binding on the rest of the market. Where I think where risks are deemed to be complex, then the decision is to be taken by the first and second leading syndicates at Lloyd's, and their joint decision will bind the rest of the market. So it greatly reduces the number of movements needed to determine a claim.
Thank you, thank you. There is one more I think we can probably have time for, and that relates to whether or not we feel that Lloyds of London is a good insurance company. That's the way the question is phrased, although I appreciate that it's not of itself an insurance company.
That's right. So Lloyds itself is not an insurance company. It is a marketplace. But that said, because the corporation of Lloyds or the Society of Lloyds sets minimum standards, monitors the performance of syndicates and their reserves, and also maintains its own central fund, it has been able to obtain ratings from for the entire market from certain rating agencies, and I think Lloyd's is very highly rated now. I think I think probably it's the last I saw with AM Best, it was an A star rating, which I think is superior. So assuming they're right, then it is indeed a very good place still to underwrite business, although I think they did put it under a negative watch in the spring when the COVID scandal was unfolding, although I don't know the latest position.
Thanks. Just quickly, one last question, which is an interesting question. The person asking asks whether the benefit to an insurance company of having a Lloyd's syndicate as opposed to not having one is simply access to the marketplace and seeing unusual risks that they wouldn't normally have access to. Do you think that's right?
I think that's right. I think people with international insurance companies want to come to Lloyd's market because they want to have access to some of these large and complex risks, which they might not otherwise see. Another reason I might want to join the market is because Lloyd's itself has a network of regulatory of licenses and market accesses around the world, particularly, well, and including nearly every state or every state in the United States, for example. So if somebody doesn't want to go to the trouble themselves of obtaining licenses in each and every jurisdiction, they might want to become members of the Lloyd's market and take advantage of the licenses and permissions that Lloyd's has around the world.
Thank you, Andrew. That concludes our questions for the time being. Back to you. Okay.
Well, so thank you, everyone. I think that's all we have time for just now. I can see there are 5 or 6 other questions which I will endeavour to respond to by email. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us. Please do complete the short feedback form, which will be on your screens when we sign off. Otherwise, feel free to include any topics you think we might cover. And remember, if you'd like to discuss today's topic in more detail, please do get in touch with me by email. Our next webinar will be on Thursday, the 15th of October, when Angus Turner and Daniela McGowan will be speaking on professional negligence insurance topic. Namely, they'll be looking at solicitors' minimum terms and conditions and whether they remain fit for purpose. Thank you very much for joining us, and I hope you have a good day.